The Long Walk by Stephen King is an incredibly disturbing book, and yet it's also incredibly simple. It's just boys walking for a prize, and if they stop, they, as it is said in the book, get their ticket, which means of course that they are killed. We literally just follow a character on this walk, and the whole time we are thinking about how sad and horrible it is, and you know that all the characters you like are going to die eventually, and it just goes on and on and on, and that's the book. A true horror. But what is it that makes this super simple concept work so well? I'm A.A. Watson, author of The Living Weapon, which also has a lot of horror elements in it, and in this video I'm going to break down why The Long Walk works so well and what we as writers can learn from it. Spoilers for The Long Walk, the book, and the movie. What is the definition of horror as a genre? Well, of course, different people would use slightly different words to describe it, but fundamentally, horror is a story that disturbs, frightens, or creates a sense of dread. But it goes deeper than that. Anne Radcliffe, an amazing English writer born in 1764, who wrote multiple Gothic novels including The Mysteries of Udolpho, wrote about the difference between horror and terror in an essay that was published after her death called On the Supernatural in Poetry. In this essay, Radcliffe writes a conversation between two characters, Mr. S and Mr. W, about supernatural elements in literature. In it, she writes, "Terror and horror are so far opposite that the first expands the soul and awakens the faculties to a high degree of life. The other contracts, freezes, and nearly annihilates them. I apprehend that neither Shakespeare nor Milton by their fictions nor Mr. Burke by his reasoning anywhere looked to positive horror as a source of the sublime, though they all agree that terror is a very high one. And where lies the great difference between horror and terror, but in the uncertainty and obscurity that accompany the first, respecting the dreaded evil." Here she makes the point that within the overall horror genre, well, at that time it was the Gothic genre, the actual feeling of horror and the feeling of terror are different. She says that terror is created by uncertainty and is what gives a reader that feeling of dread. It makes them feel alive and wakes up their mind, while horror is the reveal and will more likely disgust the reader and give them a fright, causing them to shut down. She says in this that the greatest writers, like William Shakespeare, rely on terror to elevate their writing and not horror, because that constant feeling of dread that terror creates in a reader is more powerful than the horror, which only exists in the moment of the scare when the horrible thing is revealed and then it passes. Stephen King himself expands on this in his non-fiction book about horror fiction called Dancer Macabre. In this book, he talks about the difference between terror and horror, but also adds a third part, what he calls revulsion. In this book, Stephen King talks about how terror is the suspenseful moment before the actual monster is revealed. Horror is the moment the monster is revealed that often creates shock value, and revulsion is like a gag reflex. He describes it as cheap, although he uses it in his writing sometimes, and it's just that horrified feeling we get at something revolting. He writes in the book, "I recognize terror as the finest emotion, and so I will try to terrorize the reader. But if I find that I cannot terrify, I will try to horrify. And if I find that I cannot horrify, I'll go for the gross out. I'm not proud." And that leads us back to The Long Walk. Published in 1979, this book is built almost completely on that feeling of terror, and it is a masterclass. It's about 100 boys on a walk supervised by soldiers in a dystopian totalitarian United States, and the winner gets the prize of anything they want, while the losers, anyone who falls below a speed of 4 miles per hour and gets 3 warnings, is shot dead. We follow a 16-year-old boy called Ray Garrity on this walk, and it really is that simple. Garrity walks with the other boys, and that is the whole book. Stephen King follows the premise right to the end, and the whole time we feel that terrible sense of dread. From the very beginning, King sets the tone. The descriptions from the very first page as Garrity's mum drives him to the start of the walk are so effective. For example, an old blue Ford pulled into the guarded parking lot that morning, looking like a small, tired dog after a hard run. This is the very first sentence in the book, and at first glance, it might seem like it's just a simple introduction to what's happening. But when you look closer, you start to see how it is written, starts telling you what type of book this is going to be. First of all, the thing that jumps out is the guarded parking lot. This creates questions, uncertainty, which as we established is a key part of terror. Guarded by who? For what? It's telling you that this place is restricted, but we don't yet know why. Then comparing the car to a small, tired dog is actually quite a strange word choice if you think about it. How could a car seem tired? But it works so well because it makes an inanimate object kind of feel alive, but barely. It suggests a car that's diminished, defenseless, and defeated. Ooh, alliteration. I didn't even do that on purpose. Okay, I admit it, I did that on purpose. I was gonna say vulnerable instead of defenseless, but I changed it so I could have the 3 Ds. But anyway, swiftly moving on. The next thing that jumps out about this sentence is the word choice of a hard run, which this book essentially is one long hard run. Well, walk, but same thing. Was that on purpose? I'm willing to bet that it is. Even the sentence itself is written in kind of a slow, plodding way. It's not the most exciting way to start a book, is it? A car driving into a parking lot. There is no urgency, not much external tension, except for the fact that the parking lot is guarded. But that is the point. It's already giving a sense of exhaustion, and that adds to the atmosphere this one sentence is creating. As the story picks up, the long walk isn't immediately explained. Neither is the world that they live in, and they don't even explain what actually happens clearly when you stop walking. The characters in the book call it getting your ticket, and of course it is implied what getting your ticket means, but it is not explicitly said. We only know for sure when it happens for the first time partway through chapter 2. That moment right there when the first walker is killed is horror, but all the time before that is terror. Because even though we suspect what getting your ticket means, we don't know for sure, and that uncertainty is what creates the tension within us. Sustained tension creates dread. Dread creates terror, and as Anne Radcliffe and Stephen King both agree, terror is the ultimate form of the horror genre. Because even though the first walker getting killed is a horrible moment, it does in a way ease some of the tension in your mind because you now know for certain what happens when a walker stops. There is still tension, especially around the characters who we start to like getting their tickets, but the more tension you can create for as long as you can, the better, and Stephen King made a conscious choice to not tell us what getting your ticket meant before showing us. He built the terror and then had the horror happen, which then leads to more terror. I have spoken about uncertainty in videos before. Suzanne Collins uses it in the Hunger Games books. George R.R. Martin uses it in A Game of Thrones. I use it in The Living Weapon. One of the things that separates a novice writer from a more advanced writer is how much information they withhold and for how long. Novice writers often want to just explain everything immediately and almost word vomit out all the mechanics of the story, while more experienced writers tend to understand that keeping the readers in the dark about certain things creates a better overall reading experience, and this is especially true in the horror genre. As Stephen King writes himself in Danse Macabre, he is always aiming for terror first, horror next, and then revulsion if he can't do the first two. Another way King creates terror as the book continues is through the thoughts of the main character, Garrity, and through the conversations he constantly has with the other boys. We get to witness through Garrity's eyes the other boys losing their minds, but with Garrity we get to be inside his mind as he loses it. But of course he doesn't know that he is losing his mind, and it's not directly told to us, but we get to see it. The longer the walk goes on, the crazier Garrity's thoughts become. They jump around, he says and thinks things that don't make sense, followed by something that is deeply philosophical. It's great characterization. We also see it in the other walkers, how they are physically and mentally just breaking down bit by bit, and there are moments of horror and moments of revulsion, but it is terror that is created the most as we read about these young boys going through torture. And what adds to that feeling is the fact that a lot of them, including Garrity himself, don't really have a strong reason for applying and doing this walk. A great example of that is the character Abraham, who tells Garrity that one day he was on his way to the movies when he passed by where the tryouts were happening. He happened to have his work permit on him, which you need to apply, so just on a whim he applied. He went through the physical tests easily and had fun, and then it came to the essay where you have to write why you are worthy of doing the long walk, and he did not take it seriously at all, yet he qualified. He said it was a joke to him right up until the walk started, and then he realized he's in it, and he ended up walking over 200 miles and dying because of a whim. It's incredibly sad, and there are other examples like that where we are forced to question the point of it all. The boys debate topics such as love, society, and meaning, often with a very cynical lens, and it makes us as the readers question those same topics. Elizabeth Barrett wrote in her essay Elements of Aversion, sometimes a story intends to shock and disgust, but the best horror intends to rattle our cages and shake us out of our complacency. It makes us think, forces us to confront ideas we might rather ignore, and challenges preconceptions of all kinds. For example, when the character Pete McVries says, J.D. Salinger, John Knowles, even James Kirkwood and that guy Don Breeds, they've destroyed being an adolescent, Garrity. If you're a 16-year-old boy, you can't discuss the pains of adolescent love with any decency anymore. You just come off sounded like fucking Ron Howard with a hard-on. This is an adolescent boy on essentially a death march, simultaneously talking about how literature has made it so that talking about his experiences is now embarrassing, and also making a dirty joke in the same breath. Stephen King forces you to confront the humanity of these boys, every facet of who they are as people, as flawed, still developing young people put into this horrible situation that is breaking them down physically and mentally, and they don't even understand why they are there. That is the horror that permeates throughout this whole book. And as the book continues, the despair and the dread of the characters and of us as readers only increases. The characters get more and more insane and feel like everything is getting more and more worthless. And interestingly, the characters get more rebellious as time goes on. The biggest question is, what is the point of any of this? And it makes us have to sit with that without an answer. What we believe about what is correct in a society is threatened with this book, and we are never told why, and the characters themselves can't even let us know, and we just sit with it the whole time right up until the end when Garrity loses his mind just following through the themes to their logical finale. Of course, the end is a bit open-ended, so perhaps Garrity died or something else happened, but to me it seemed he finally just broke, and that's how it ends. The Long Walk is a great horror book, and it does not rely on revulsion or horror by King's own definitions, but on terror. And everything in the book, from the simple premise to the characters to the writing style, is deliberately made to add to that feeling of terror. That, at least for me, stayed with me well after I finished the book. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, then why not check out another one of my literary analysis videos on screen right now.